What if the man who saved Islam in Spain also destroyed the most sophisticated Islamic civilization on earth? Same man, same sword, same year. Muslim kings were literally paying Christian kings gold just to stay alive, and they called that diplomacy. But here's what nobody tells you. The man who came to save Islamic Spain wasn't even from Spain. He was from the edge of the Sahara Desert, wore rough wool, ate barley, and his soldiers hadn't seen a city in their lives. His name was Yusuf ibn Tashfin, leader of the Almoravids. By 1086, the Taifa kings, 11 broken, luxury-drunk Muslim kingdoms of Al-Andalus, had lost Toledo to Alfonso VI of Castile. They were next. In desperation, they sent a letter south across the strait. "Come, save us!" Yusuf crossed the sea with an army of desert warriors. At the Battle of Zallaqa, in 90 minutes, Alfonso's crusader army was shattered. The Christian advance stopped cold. But here's the twist that breaks your brain. Yusuf looked at those same Muslim kings who begged him for help and saw the real problem. These men had poets, wine, silk robes, and zero spine. They taxed their own Muslim people to pay their Christian enemies. Yusuf went back to Morocco, then came back, not to help them, to replace them. One by one, he took every Taifa kingdom. The savior became the conqueror of the very people he saved. And here's what hits different. He wasn't wrong. Under Almoravid rule, Al-Andalus survived another 400 years. The civilization, the libraries, the science, the philosophy that lit up medieval Europe while it sat in darkness, lived because one man from the desert was ruthless enough to save people from themselves. Sometimes the harshest hand carries the most mercy. Would you have made the same choice as Yusuf, or let them fall on their own? Drop it below. And if history actually felt like this in school, you'd have never skipped a class. Follow, because we're just getting started. Imagine a city so advanced that while the rest of Europe couldn't read, this city had 70 libraries. While Paris had mud streets and wooden churches, this city had paved roads, street lighting, running water inside homes. While Christian kings were dying of infected teeth, this city had 50 hospitals. We're not talking about Baghdad. We're not talking about Cairo. We're talking about Cordoba, Spain. The year is 960 CE, and this right here is the most sophisticated city on the face of the planet Earth. The Islamic Golden Age didn't just happen in the Middle East. It happened in Europe, right under Europe's nose. And then they threw it all away. Let's go back, all the way back. 711 CE, a Berber general named Tariq ibn Ziyad crosses the Strait of Gibraltar with 7,000 soldiers. Reference Ibn Abdul Hakam, Futu Misa, one of the earliest accounts of the Islamic conquest of Spain. He looks back at the water behind him. He orders his ships burned. No retreat, no going home. His speech to his soldiers, recorded by historians, is one of the most raw, aggressive pieces of military rhetoric ever documented. The sea is behind you. The enemy is in front of you. By God, there's nothing for you but truth and patience. In 3 years, just 3 years, Muslim armies controlled 90% of the Iberian Peninsula. The Visigoths, the Germanic Christian rulers of Spain, collapsed like a house of cards. Why? Because the local population, Jews who had been persecuted, farmers who had been taxed into poverty, slaves with no future, they didn't fight back against the Muslim armies. Many of them opened the gates. Reference Richard Fletcher, Moorish Spain, 1992, Chapter 1. This wasn't just a military conquest. This was a civilization transplant. Fast forward, 36 a man named Abdul Rahman, a surviving prince of the Umayyad dynasty, who had fled the Abbasid massacre of his entire family in Damascus, arrives in Spain, alone, hunted, with nothing. Within 5 years, he is the ruler of Al-Andalus. Reference Hugh Kennedy, Muslim Spain and Portugal, A Political History. 96. He builds the great mosque of Cordoba, still standing today. Still one of the most breathtaking structures ever built by human hands. He plants Syrian palm trees because they reminded him of home. He writes poetry about exile and longing. And he builds a kingdom. In 29 CE, his descendant Abdul Rahman III looks at the Islamic world and makes a decision that shocks everyone. He declares himself caliph, not just king, not just ruler. Caliph, commander of the faithful, the title that meant supreme leadership of the entire Muslim world. Reference Brian Catlos, Kingdoms of Faith, A New History of Islamic Spain, 2018. Cordoba becomes the capital of a caliphate rivaling Baghdad, rivaling Constantinople. At its absolute peak, 500,000 people live in Cordoba, making it the largest city in Western Europe. 1,600 mosques, 900 public baths, 70 libraries. The Royal Library alone held 400,000 manuscripts. At the same time, the largest library in Christian Europe held fewer than 400 books. Scholars from across the known world flood into Cordoba. Muslim, Christian, Jewish, side by side. A Jewish scholar named Hasdai ibn Shaprut becomes the caliph's personal physician and chief diplomat. A Christian monk named Gilbert of Aurillac studies mathematics in Cordoba and later becomes Pope Sylvester II, the first French pope in history, bringing back what he learned from the Muslims of Spain. This is the world that was built. This is what was at stake. And this is exactly what the people who built it decided to destroy. 1009 CE. One word. Fitna. In Arabic it means civil strife, chaos, temptation, the tearing of the social fabric. The Umayyad Caliphate of Cordoba, the most powerful Islamic state in the Western world, implodes. Not because of Christian armies, not because of outside invasion, because of internal power struggles. Palace coup. Competing heirs, mercenary armies that turned on their masters. The royal palace of Medina Azahara, built by Abd al-Rahman III, a masterpiece of Islamic architecture so magnificent it took 25 years and 10,000 workers to build, is looted and burned by Muslim factions fighting each other. Burned by Muslims fighting Muslims for a throne that was already crumbling. 1031 CE. The caliphate officially dissolves. What replaces it? The Taifa kingdoms. Taifa, from the Arabic word for faction or party. Spain, which was once one powerful Islamic state, fractures into more than 30 tiny kingdoms. Reference: Hugh Kennedy, Muslim Spain and Portugal, Chapter 6. 30 kingdoms, 30 kings, 30 courts, 30 sets of advisors, all telling their little king that he is the most powerful man in Spain. And here is where the tragedy becomes almost darkly comedic. If it weren't so devastating, these Taifa kings sitting in their tiny, fractured courts refuse to act like small kings. They act like the great caliphs they are not. They compete with each other through culture. Poetry contests, architecture, music, philosophy. Each king trying to outdo his neighbor by patronizing more poets, building more palaces, hosting more philosophers. The courts of Seville, Granada, Toledo, Saragossa, Badajoz, they produce stunning art, brilliant literature, mathematical and philosophical advances that still echo in Western academia today. The ornament of the world, how Muslims, Jews and Christians created a culture of tolerance in medieval Spain. 2002. This is the golden age of Ibn Hazm, whose The Ring of the Dove is one of the greatest texts on love ever written. This is the golden age of Samuel ibn Nagrilah, a Jewish vizier who commanded Muslim armies and wrote Hebrew war poetry while riding into battle. This is the era of Al-Mutamid of Seville, a king so devoted to poetry that he composed verses with his prime minister while walking on palace grounds. Beautiful, brilliant, breathtaking, and completely suicidal. Because while these kings were writing love poems, Alfonso VI of Castile was sharpening his sword. The Christian kingdoms of the north, Castile, Leon, Aragon, Navarre, had been slowly, carefully, methodically pushing south for decades. This was the beginning of what history would later call the Reconquista, the Christian reconquest of Spain. And the Taifa kings knew it was coming. So what did they do? They paid. The pariah system, documented extensively by historian Brian Catlos, was essentially a protection racket. Taifa kings paid gold tribute to Christian kings in exchange for not being attacked. Reference Brian Catlos, Kingdoms of Faith, Chapter 7. Read that again. Muslim kings paying Christian kings gold to be left alone. The great-great-grandchildren of warriors who burned their ships on the shores of Spain were now writing checks to their enemies just to survive another season. And the Christian kings, they played the Taifa kings against each other brilliantly. Alfonso VI, king of Leon and Castile, didn't even have to fight most of the time. He simply sent letters. Pay me this season and I won't march south. Your neighbor in Seville refused to pay me. Interesting, isn't it? He turned the Taifa kings against each other, used their rivalries, jealousies, and egos as weapons against all of them. The most devastating thing about this period isn't the Christian advance. It's that the Taifa kings helped it happen. May 25, 1085, the date that changes everything. Toledo falls. Reference Richard Fletcher, Moorish Spain, Chapter 5. Toledo, the ancient Visigoth capital, the symbolic heart of the Iberian Peninsula, a city that had been under Muslim rule for 374 years, a city of mosques and monasteries standing side by side, a city of Arabic scholarship and Jewish philosophy and Christian theology all woven together in the same narrow streets. Alfonso VI of Castile doesn't even have to storm it. The Taifa king of Toledo, Al-Qadir, is so weak, so hated by his own people, so desperate. He negotiates his own removal. He hands Alfonso the keys in exchange for being given a minor lordship elsewhere. He trades one of the most historically significant cities in all of Islam for a comfortable retirement. The news hits the rest of Islamic Spain like a physical blow. If Toledo fell, if a city that large, that fortified, that symbolically important could be handed over without a real fight, then nothing was safe. Seville could fall. Granada could fall. Cordoba, the city of 400,000 people and 400,000 manuscripts, could fall. The whole dream, the whole civilization, the whole experiment of Al-Andalus, gone. The remaining Taifa kings, the ones who had spent decades writing poetry and paying tribute and scheming against each other, finally looked at each other and admitted the truth they had refused to speak aloud. They could not save themselves. They sent a letter, south, across the Strait of Gibraltar, across the water that Tariq ibn Ziyad had crossed going the other direction, 374 years earlier, to a man they had never met, a man they had heard stories about, a man who made them profoundly, deeply uncomfortable, because this man was not like them. He didn't write poetry. He didn't host philosophical salons. He didn't wear silk. He ate barley bread and camel meat. He wore rough wool, muraka, the garment of desert ascetics. His soldiers didn't speak Arabic fluently. They spoke Amazigh, Berber. His empire wasn't built on culture and philosophy. It was built on faith, discipline, and conquest. His name was Yusuf ibn Tashfin, leader of the Almoravids, commander of an army forged in the Sahara Desert, a man who had already unified all of northwest Africa under his rule, from the Senegal River to the Atlas Mountains, through a combination of military genius and iron religious conviction. Reference: Nehemiah Leftion, The Almoravids, in the Cambridge History of Africa, Volume 2, 1978. The letter from the Taifa kings to Yusuf was essentially this: "We are losing Spain. Come, help us. You are the only Muslim leader powerful enough to stop what is coming." And when Yusuf ibn Tashfin received that letter, when this 70-year-old warrior from the edge of the Sahara read the words of these soft, desperate kings begging for his help, he did not respond immediately. He prayed. He consulted his scholars. He asked his religious advisors whether it was permitted to cross into Spain and fight. And then he sent back one word: coming. What happens next? The crossing, the battle, the victory, and the betrayal is one of the most dramatic reversals in all of medieval history. An army of desert warriors facing the most powerful Christian military force in Iberia, at a place called Zallaqa, in the year 1086 CE. And what happens in those 90 minutes of battle will determine whether Islamic civilization in Europe lives or dies. 374 years of civilization. Libraries, hospitals, poetry, mathematics, philosophy. The most advanced corner of the medieval world, teetering on the edge of extinction. And the only man who could save it was a man the people who built it looked down upon. A man from the desert, wearing rough wool, eating barley, speaking a language they barely recognized, leading soldiers who had never seen a city like Cordoba in their lives. Yusuf ibn Tashfin was coming, and nothing, not Islamic Spain, not Christian Spain, not the very idea of Al-Andalus itself, would ever be the same again.